Since it's October, I thought I would do another part of my series, Please Rewind Presents, which is a memoir, if you will. It's a retelling of events in my life that mean a lot to me in very personal ways. I want to focus on a particular topic that I think a lot of people can relate to, certainly with like Halloween fanatics and fall fanatics like myself, which seems to be most of this generation. And I'll try to say this with clarity so it doesn't like go all over the place or feel like a rant or so on. Because I do think there's a lot of really uh, fun stories within this. There's a lot of things to talk about in here. So the first haunted house recollection I have is from being very young. Now this would be one of those weekend things they do around Halloween at schools where it would either be on the playground or in a cafeteria or in an auditorium somewhere like that. They would have games for kids to play, haunted houses, those boxes that you stick your hand in and it's spaghetti and there's supposed to be eyeballs in there, that sort of thing. I remember going to one of those and seeing Halloween H2O. I was like 7, and I didn't like the movie much then. Anyway, I remember this very young. I remember there being a bouncy castle. I remember eating hot dogs. And I remember going through very small haunted houses. And I remember it being amazing. I was wearing a Superman costume, but it was a homemade Superman costume. So I was wearing blue pajamas, red underwear. My parents had painted the S on the chest of the pajamas. And my cape was a tablecloth that was held together by a paper clip. I shit you not. I was little Superman, little blonde Superman at the time. I still have Superman colors, if you notice. Yeah, even the yellow's in there. So, yeah, so Superman, little kid at the school, haunted house shit. I remember that. It was very nostalgic, very lovely. Different time in the 90s. I went to a school that had a pretty big budget. It was a very successful school, so they were able to put on these big events. I'm not really sure if they do this kind of stuff as much nowadays. Anyway, many Scooby-Doo marathons later, watching on Cartoon Network, and a fascination and love with horror movies sort of took me to a new place where the idea of a haunted house was like the most appealing thing in the world to me. I've often been chasing the perfect haunted house, much like the ultimate high, the dragon, if you will. See, in my head, there's like a 2-hour haunted house with a narrative, all sorts of crazy special effects. It takes you through tunnels and different sorts of rooms of imagination, and it's not just people jumping out at you every 5 seconds with some shitty Halloween costume on. It's actually got a sense of atmosphere, dread building, a mythology, if you will. That's my ideal haunted house that I've been looking for. I've heard there's haunted houses that are pretty great, like that across the country, especially on the other side of one side of Pennsylvania near Philadelphia, which I did not live at, unfortunately. I lived closer to Pittsburgh. I grew up in Texas and went to a lot of haunted houses. Another one that comes to mind real quick was one that I still think holds up as one of the just pure ideas of what I would think a haunted house should be. There was one element in particular, because I went to this 3 times. This was in a smallish town in Texas that was a little distance, not too far from where I grew up. And this was just done by these local people. It was done with some theater actors and at a local theater there. It was done with people who worked in the town. It was, I think, a lawyer had invested in it. And they had this huge mansion, and they turned the whole mansion into a haunted house. I mean, the whole goddamn place. And it was so amazing. The sets, I mean, I can't really emphasize this enough. Like, the sets and costumes and all that were at a very high level. Like, much, much better than I was expecting. And it wasn't done in that, like, Eli Roth hostile way that a lot of haunted houses look like now. It was actually done in more of this universal monster sort of era style, but it also had a lot of gore to it. But early on, you go into a room with a girl in a wedding dress, which I've seen in other haunted houses, and it looks like she has no eyes. And she starts asking for you to help her. And you're very close to her. It's not like there's a wall between you. You're by this bed. Because they would only let, like, I think 6 people go together at a time, because there was a lot of small rooms that a scene would act out, which I think is a good way to do a haunted house. And her reaching her arm out, begging for you to help her without her eyes. I gotta say, man, just because how good the actress was, that she actually could act, she wasn't somebody doing this as a gig. She was actually like somebody just getting a job to act in a haunted house. She actually could act. Freaked me the fuck out. And then here's the thing about that too. I went there a few days later, and it was a different actress doing that part, and it wasn't as good. And that really clicked for me, like, man, that's part of it. That was a terrific haunted house, though. They had people crawling above you on the ceilings and stuff like that. I mean, it was crazy. The pacing of it was fantastic. Near the end, it got a little bit more cliche, but overall, very well done. Another thing, in Dallas, there was a wax museum and Ripley's Believe It or Not. They have these all over the country. There's a section in this wax museum, the final part of it, that's horror related, where they have all these wax figures of like Freddy Krueger, the Xenomorph, Universal monsters, like the Wolfman, Dracula. Fucking incredible. Like, holy shit, it starts, you go there and you see Jack the Ripper and the Wicked Witch. Like, you're going down the Yellow Brick Road, there's a Wizard of Oz section, and then you enter into the horror segment. The part where you see the Xenomorph, you're actually in the room from fucking Alien. You can look in and see the eggs. It's pretty fucking scary. Straight up. Terrific. And I think it takes like 20 minutes to walk through this thing. This was years ago, but I went to it a few times. Very well done. Let's skip ahead now. Pennsylvania. So, hopped around to a lot of corn mazes and stuff like that, things that weren't that interesting. Once again, chasing narrative. I remember me and a group of friends went and took a gig at a golf course where we filmed the haunted trail through the woods for these people who were putting it on. The guy who owned the golf course and his friend had built this haunted trail. And my friends were actors in it. And I couldn't really find anything for me to do because I had already filmed people going through it. So there was nothing more to do. I was just going to make DVD copies for them so they could have it, and they were paying me to do it. And it was really fun. I was like, yeah, I'll go hang out. Everyone that worked there was a fucking weirdo. I mean, they were worse than carnies. Some of the people they had hired on staff were like, the stuff they were saying was borderline psychopath. Like, it was so creepy, and the women were what you expected, like hypersexual, and it was fun though. But I couldn't figure out a role for myself to take on in this, so I decided that I had a pitch that, why don't I start at the front of the line, and I'll get to know people. I'll start conversations with people, and then I'll go down the trail with them, and then at some point I'll drift off and leave. And the only reason it'll make an impact is that they had an interaction with me. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't notice. So at the beginning of this, I would go pick a target. I would go start conversing with them and making up everything about my life, where I was from. I told people I was Canadian a lot of the time. And then we'd go in the trail together, and then at some point I'd find a good moment, different time, to sneak away and get out of there. That was a lot of fun, although it did get tiring going back in that circle over and over again, because I'd have to walk up this huge fucking hill and sneak around to get to the beginning of the line, because I didn't want people to notice me. But they did let me, drive some golf balls there for free, and they made us hot chocolate. So thank you very much. It was also weird that the main character in their narrative in their trail was Hunter, and I had made a horror film that year called Hunter. But I guess that was just a coincidence. Now, let's talk about... So what I'm thinking about, yes, in a neighborhood that I lived in for a few years. Oh, beautiful neighborhood. One of those neighborhoods that felt like the 50s. Like, you could walk around at night. There was a basketball court there that I used to shoot a lot of stuff at, because it had this great light that came down, a street light in between the fence that was there between the court, and you could really get these nice shots, especially in between the openings of the fence. So, love shooting there. I used to jog there all the time and all stuff. There was a guy who, just down the road, lived in this huge house that had a bar in it that everybody would go drink at, and I was like, what? This sounds fucking awesome. And this guy turned his whole house into a haunted house. Now, when I hear that, I figure it's going to be like the people that decorate their houses up with, inflatable Halloween objects. They put a tombstone and some ghosts in their yard. And that stuff's badass. Don't get me wrong. When you're a kid trick-or-treating and you see that shit, that's the house you want to go to. You don't want to go to a house that looks all safe and happy with the light on. Like, what is this? Leave It to Beaver? The thing that was crazy, though, is you go to this guy's place, and it was actually impressive. And that's why it's making this list, only because it was so beautiful that this guy had that child dream of making his own haunted house, but he actually did one. And the fact that you went through it, it was a giant garage. Then you went into his house, and his whole house was done up for this. And then he decorated his bar that he built in his house for Halloween. So you'd end up in this bar with spider webs and all that hanging around. And it was like being in the slaughtered lamb from American Werewolf in London. Fucking terrific. Went to that every year, would take friends to it. Always surprised. Like, it wasn't some bullshit thing where you went in and it was 5 minutes. He actually put money and time into this. I mean, you could spend some time there looking at the stuff. And he went for atmosphere. Once again, it was atmosphere over, like, jump scares. Like, don't you like how this feels when you're in here? And as an adult, that's really... I remember taking my nephews to that one year because I always trick-or-treated with them because I secretly wanted candy. So I was Speed Racer the first year I went to that. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so one of the best ones I ever had, Conneaut Lake in Pennsylvania. They turned the whole amusement park into a series of haunted houses, and it ended with you riding a roller coaster at night, an old wooden roller coaster that was fucking a rough ride. That thing fucking kicked your ass. And you would go through these levels of horror. Now, I will say right now, the haunted houses were all cliche. It was the same shit. You get hit with wind, you go through, bubbles. There's people touching you through walls. There's jump scares. It's a maze of dark corridors. It's all the stuff that a haunted house does. Which, cool, whatever. But what made it great, it wasn't the haunted house parts. What's cool is there was an excess of them. It was really clever to have like 15 of them separated, which took your time. It took you a couple hours to get through it. And also have it where there was a bar there, although I think a lot of that burned down, but there was a bar there right by a beach and a lake there, and you could go drink at this bar, and it was great. And it was packed with people at the amusement park. But really what made it work was the atmosphere, the location. It makes me think of that Scooby-Doo episode with the haunted amusement park. Seeing the leaves on the ground in Pennsylvania during the fall, and all these food stands and these pumpkins, getting there during the daytime and it having that Halloween feel like you're in Hocus Pocus or something. Or Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree. You're in this environment. That was what made it great. And when it got to night, it looked like you were in fucking Elm Street. You're walking around and it's all these old houses that used to be there. It's like a neighborhood. So you're walking through that and it's huge. And there's a hotel there that's supposedly haunted. Not that I believe in anything like that, but me and a friend went up there in our early 20s, and we weren't sure how it was going to be. We figured the haunted houses were going to be predictable, but neither one of us had actually been to Conneaut Lake, which is, very historical, old amusement park. So we went there, and it was just perfect atmosphere from the beginning. Like I said, how I was describing it, and we got in trouble for going down to the lower deck of the bar, which was closed because we wanted to see what was going on down there, and security almost kicked us out over that. Which that wasn't fun. Then we got drunk and walked our way up to the haunted house, the haunted hotel, which was a pretty big hotel and an old hotel. It was very overlook. And we ended up walking down the hallways. There was even a bar in there that was like the overlook. We walked down all these hallways and we saw a door open and we went in it. We went in somebody's fucking hotel room. Because for some reason we were like pretending we were ghost hunters and we could do whatever we wanted. And we figured they didn't have cameras. God, this place was old as shit. So we went into someone's room and their bags are on their bed and shit. And I'm like, what are we doing? And we stood there for a while. And then we left. And that security guy, like we ran into him a few times that day. I don't know what was going on. It was like the kids running from the evil authority figure. So you go through all the haunted houses, that's whatever. Some of them were better than others, but it's mostly stuff you've seen before. They were understaffed. They had so many haunted houses, they didn't have enough people. So people had to run to different haunted houses for the scares. But overall, great experience. The fact that you could go to the bar, you could hang out by a beach, you could go to this hotel and drink. You could go through the haunted houses, and they would click you on a ticket. And then it ended with the roller coaster, which I'm scared of roller coasters. The beanie flew off my head on this roller coaster. My knee rammed in front of me where my seat was. The bar they have there, I kept running into it. Not very fun experience. We were there, though, till like midnight. Hung out at a Walmart the rest of the night because there was nothing in that fucking area except Walmarts and gas stations. Shit like that. So, a couple more to knock off here that I remember quite well. An actual haunted house, if you will. It was this mansion that my friend's family had owned. But because nobody could decide who owned it, it was they had so much they owed in property tax, nobody could really live there or own it. It was on an estate. There were several houses around it. This was a 4-story mansion. Huge. I mean a legit mansion, not like your friend has a big house. Like, oh my god, it takes a long time to go through this place. Several bathrooms, several bedrooms, several living rooms, kitchens. There was an old diner in it. This thing was old. So we had heard that it was haunted, so we went up there in a group, about 10 of us, of friends at the time, and we stayed the night over there. Now, eventually 7 people left, and I believe only 3, it might have been 6 people left. 3 or 4 of us were left at the end of the night sleeping on a couch in one of the living rooms at like 3:30 in the morning. So this place actually used to be a haunted house where they actually had people come in and they made money off of it. They did this several years ago, so there was still stuff in the house from when it was a haunted house, including a dungeon room. They had a dungeon room they built under the house. There was pictures all over the walls. Eventually, it just became like it felt like it was all bullshit. Like they had turned it into more of a haunted house and added these Shining-esque things to make it scarier than it actually was. But it was creepy. It was creepy being there just because it was so huge. It was nighttime. We were there. We were isolated. We all went in separate rooms and tried to have experiences with ghosts. I think I saw a raccoon at one point. That was the scariest moment of the whole evening. So that was what was that was really fun, just because it was the fantasy of being in a big haunted house with your friends. And I would have liked if we could have partied and stuff like that, but there was very strict rules being there that they even let us go there. But there was a moment we were all in the kitchen trying to make a game plan of what we were going to do. It was like that scene in Poltergeist when they're in the kitchen, and then a fucking huge noise came through the whole place, and we all freaked out. And it was just something wrong with the heater. It was just something in the vents. It was like a fucking animal in it or something that was running around. But for at least 10 seconds, the skeptic in me died. For a few seconds, I was truly terrified, and I was like, man, some shit's going down. Like, I can't wait. Like, there's nothing I want more than to see a demon or a ghost right now. Like, please, God, please. And then the next day, we drank coffee and walked around the estate, and it was beautiful, and there was nothing creepy about it. And I was just like, well, shit, wouldn't this be nice to live here? Beautiful. The last one that I went to recently was with my fiance, who was my girlfriend at the time, and we went to a haunted house somewhere that was really cool because it was kind of stuck in between trees and more of a foresty area around a neighborhood. I would like if a house was more secluded. But we went there and it had a lot of typical stuff. There was a good Freddy Krueger stretch, and then another good one was one that actually took about 45 minutes. That was at a campsite where they used just miles of stuff to do this long haunted house, and you kind of went on these series of tunnels and tubes and stuff like. It was really cool, and you had to walk across these bridges and stuff like that. I wish the effects had been better, but the idea of it was very much right. So, like I said, ideal haunted house takes an hour and a half, takes a couple hours, has a good story, mythology. There's rules that get established. It's more about creeping you out. Really good effects, really good sets. I don't want a bunch of jump scares. I don't want something out yelling at me, getting in my way. I don't want it to just be all about sound and visceral experience. I don't want it to just be try to overload my senses. I actually want you to have to genuinely scare me, which I get is difficult. But yet still a Scooby-Doo, X-Files, Supernatural-esque approach where I'm trying to solve this mystery, or I am skeptical of it, and you're playing with that. And good actors, which you don't need a lot of them. You can space it out. But of course, it would cost a lot of money to do such a thing. Anyway, I'm still searching for the ultimate haunted house. I've been to so many more than the ones I've listed. I think I've been to at least over 100 of them. And I've never had that perfect experience. I've never had that perfect one that hit all the right buttons. I've just had different combinations of that from several different places, and I've always looked for a new feeling that I never can seem to get. Like when I was a kid, I went to one in Niagara Falls in Canada, and it was really fun. They actually had really good like puppets and animatronics and stuff like that, but it was a lot of the stuff, the patterns I developed going through that one when I was young on that vacation. I just saw them repeated over and over again, and I suppose a formula works. But you also have to expand upon the formula to do something really special. And even though everyone loves Halloween now and they watch their movies and do all that, I think the communal events of Halloween, going out and interacting with people and being around them and celebrating it together, is really the heart of the holiday and what I want more of. In haunted houses, one of the more exciting parts, I think, is waiting in line with people and having interactions with strangers and just that sitting around waiting for it. I think that's really the experience. And that's why the Conneaut Lake one was so good, because it was being there with thousands of other people. doing a similar thing to you, but there was interactions with people that you would never meet again. There were strangers that you would have conversations with going through this stuff, and some of them very quirky and eccentric, and everybody was having a good time. And that's the dream to me. It's just being able to share what I love about this holiday with other people and being nostalgic in that moment. So, what's your haunted house story, your favorite one? And I don't mean haunted house like ghost hunting. I mean like a fake haunted house, a magic trick, if you will. They're being implicit with it. And yeah, what's your best experience, and what's your ideal haunted house? And was it at a theme park? Was it at something you went through? Because it means a lot to me, and I feel like in my head maybe we all think we could make the perfect haunted house. But if you ever watch James Rolfe's video where he shows his childhood and through the years he kept doing a haunted house, it's just the spirit of it that you want to be part of that thing that you love. The aesthetics of Halloween with the feeling of Halloween and how they complement each other in that way, and how you want to be part of that creative process because it helps fuel your perspective and point of view on the world, and even to a degree your morality and how you view violence. I certainly think horror movies have done that for me. And just the innocence of Halloween. I don't like Halloween being dark. I don't like these edgy haunted houses that are all about gore and being fucked up and a demonic bunny. I prefer when it makes you feel innocent. It celebrates that. And that's to me what I'm really chasing. I'm not really trying to get scared. I don't really want you to scare me. I want you to give me a sense of whimsy, if you will. But that's all there is to it. There's much more to talk about. Happy Halloween coming up at the end of this month, and there will be more Halloween-oriented content to come.